Let's talk about something many of us feel every single day. Professional women today have more choices, more opportunities than ever before in history. But, and it's a big but, all those choices have created this incredibly complex new challenge. How do you balance a demanding career with, well, everything else? It's like a modern tightrope walk. And that's what we're diving into, the working woman's dilemma. This quote from Carol Enneking just hits the nail on the head. Just because we have all these choices does not mean that we can or should choose to do it all. It perfectly captures the paradox, right? The very freedom of having all these options can turn into this crushing pressure to do everything and to do it all perfectly. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll break down what we mean by the equilibrium problem. Then, we'll get into the very real barriers women face at work. After that, we'll talk about the second shift, the work that starts when you get home. We'll look at the psychological toll of all this. And then, most importantly, we'll talk about how we can start forging a new, better balance. Okay, so let's jump right in with this idea of the female equilibrium problem. It's a really modern issue because it comes directly from this explosion of professional choices that, kind of ironically, have created a whole new set of personal challenges. And here's the real kicker. Think about the very qualities that make women so successful at work. Ambition, being dependable, being totally goal-driven. Well, those strengths can become a double-edged sword. When you apply that same high-octane energy to your career, your home, your family, your friendships, it's a recipe for total burnout. Something's got to give. But here's the thing. This isn't just an internal battle. It's made so much harder by real systemic problems in the professional world. And you don't have to take my word for it. When you look at the actual data, the picture becomes alarmingly clear. Let's start with this number, 25%. As of 2022 in India, that's the female labor force participation rate, just 1 in 4. That shows you there's a huge hurdle right at the starting line before we even get to talking about promotions or leadership. And what about for those who are in the workforce? Well, the path to the top is narrow. In 2023, women held just 10% of C-suite executive roles. You know, we talk about a glass ceiling, but for so many, it feels more like a concrete one. And all of this has a massive emotional cost. A staggering 72% of female employees report high levels of stress. And that's not just about deadlines and long hours. It's the invisible weight you carry when you're trying to succeed in a system that often feels like it wasn't built with you in mind. A huge driver of that stress comes from something called microaggressions. These are those little things, the subtle comments, the jokes, the questions that seem innocent but aren't. They're like paper cuts. One might not seem like a big deal, but over and over, day after day, they create this incredibly draining, hostile environment. And these microaggressions are usually symptoms of much bigger, baked-in biases. You've got the prove it again bias, this constant pressure to show you know what you're doing. There's the tightrope, where you have to be assertive but not bossy, warm but not a pushover. And of course, the maternal wall, that awful assumption that as soon as a woman has children, her ambition and competence just vanish. Okay, so you've somehow navigated all of that for 8, 9, 10 hours. You finally clock out. But for millions of women, the work is far from over. In fact, they're just starting their unpaid second shift. And this second shift is so much more than just loading the dishwasher. It's the whole operation. Running the household, managing everyone's schedules, being the family's go-to for emotional support and practical care. It's basically a full-time management job with zero pay, no time off, and it has a huge impact on your well-being and your career. Here's an interesting way to think about the cognitive side of this. Research often points to a tendency for men to compartmentalize, focusing on one thing at a time. In contrast, many women describe their brains as having way too many tabs open at once. You're thinking about that work project, but also about what's for dinner, who has soccer practice, and whether the permission slip got signed. It's constant. And that constant juggling has a name. It's called the cognitive mental load. And this is key. It's not the physical labor of doing the chores. It's the invisible, endless work of managing it all. It's knowing when the bills are due, scheduling the doctor's appointments, remembering the birthdays. It's the mental gymnastics that keeps the entire family afloat, and it falls disproportionately on women. So let's put it all together. You've got these barriers at work, you've got the second shift, you've got this massive mental load. What does all of that do to a person, really? Well, let's look at the psychological and social toll. This chart is really eye-opening. A study asked working women about the biggest psychological issues they face. Number one, by a long shot, is stress. No huge surprise there. But look at what's number two, favoritism. That's not just a feeling. That points directly back to those biases at work, the sense that the game is rigged.
Now let's look at the other side of the coin, the social challenges. And what's number one? Balancing home and work. This is the second shift and the mental load showing up in the data, plain as day. And right behind it are societal and family pressures. You can see just how deeply all of these issues are connected.
So, we've laid out the problem. It's big, it's complicated, and it's exhausting. But just dwelling on the challenges isn't going to fix anything. So let's pivot. Let's talk about solutions and the actionable steps we can take, both in our organizations and in our own lives. If we're going to make any real change at work, it has to be built on one core idea: psychological safety. It's a simple concept, but it's radical. It means creating a culture where people feel safe enough to speak up, to disagree, to admit a mistake, or to be vulnerable, without fearing that they'll be punished or pushed aside for it. Without that foundation, nothing else works. So, what does building that kind of safety actually look like? Well, it starts with the absolute non-negotiables: strict policies, safe and clean facilities. But it has to go deeper. It means transparent communication, genuinely asking for feedback. It means offering real flexibility, not just paying lip service to it. And crucially, it means training managers to actively fight bias in pay and promotions, to dismantle the unfair systems from the inside. And while organizations have a huge role to play, there are powerful things we can do on a personal level to reclaim some balance. This isn't about adding more to your plate. It's about being strategic. Of course, things like time management help, and open communication at home is vital for sharing that load. Stress-reducing habits? Not a luxury, they're a survival tool. But maybe the most powerful step of all brings us back to where we started. It's learning the art of saying no, so you can save your precious yes for what truly matters. And that leaves us with this final, really powerful question. A speaker in one of the sources we studied put it very bluntly: this world was made by men for men. So maybe the real challenge here isn't just about helping women fit better into the system we have. Maybe the real question we need to be asking is, how do we rebuild it so it works for everyone?